this course we are going to study a bit more about it, okay? And we are going to look into the properties, specifically some reactions and so on. And then we are also going to look into the nuclear model. Now, by nuclear model, one of the most popular model which has been successful in explaining a lot of things has been the shell model. So nuclear shell model will be something which is very important because it explains a lot of things. For example, magic numbers, okay? Because you know that some elements do show a very good stability. Okay? And when we actually plot a graph between the binding energy per nucleon and the atomic number or the mass number, we basically get some kind of peaks. So those peaks actually represent some very stable atom. Now why does that happen? That is something which can be related with magic numbers. And this is something also which you have seen it before, but then most of the time we had a study of this from a qualitative point of view. This time we are going to derive some equations, okay? We are going to understand some potential and all. So see, we are going to talk about here the single particle potential, the square wave potential and all. So that means quantum mechanics is very much present in this unit, okay, harmonic oscillators and all. So the approach is more or less going to be the same. So whatever solutions we are going to derive is not going to be something which you have not heard of, okay. You might have already known these things, but we are going to take it from a different point of view, from nuclear physics point of view. Then we are going to also talk about something which is called the Wood-Saxon's model. Okay, here also we are going to talk about the spin-orbit interaction. So the spin of the nuclei, okay, plays an important role in defining a lot of its properties. Okay, the spin around its own axis. So these properties also we are going to explore. Okay, so if we have studied about nuclear physics or atomic physics, we know about ms, okay, the spin quantum number, or only s, half and plus half and minus half and so on. Okay, so these things we are going to deal with here. So we are going to talk about quantum numbers. We are also going to talk about something which we call as the extreme single particle model. Some of the things which are there in the shell structure can be explained better if you consider these kind of models. So this is also there. And then what are its benefits, the extreme single particle model. But then there are also some failure in order to understand the term like pairity or ground state spin and so on. Okay, so you know the ground states, it will have minimum energy, so the chances of spin and all those things analysis will be done. And then there is something which is called the Norden's rule. But we will start with radioactive decay, and we will actually start, all of us should be on the same page. So we are going to start with the very basic, okay? And don't worry, this is actually something which is needed for a lifetime. It should be ALPHA, not ALFA. I missed out that spelling. So it's alpha, beta, and gamma decay, okay? And then we are going to talk about the half-life and the mean life. So this particular chapter, at least the first part of this chapter, will have a lot of numericals. So please be ready. Okay, probably not today. Today we are not going to do any kind of numerical. We're just going to do a brief revision of whatever we know about radioactivity. Okay? But we are going to look into some finer points which might be more detailed. And then we are going to talk about half-life and mean life, which is again important. Derivation, you might have already done it, but anyway, we will just do it for the sake of the course. I think this is important. So let's start this, okay? And then we are going to just start off with the radioactive decay. So the background image that has been using from unit 1 onwards, from the first class onwards, probably this is more related to the unit of this chapter, okay? And of course with fission and fusion, okay? So we are going to look into these kind of three-dimensional representations again and again when we talk about radioactive decay, nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, okay? So for all of us who actually have not have a very clear image or kind of forgot about the alpha, beta and gamma decay, let's just have this picture clear that when we say alpha decay, we do have helium nuclei which is actually there, and it will basically come out of the nuclei, okay? So we have this, we call it as the alpha decay. So that means this is actually quite heavy because we know that mass number is 4. So the number of proton is 2, the number of neutron is 2. So that means it's one of the heaviest, okay, in the radioactive decay. In fact, this is the heaviest of all the known decay types. Then we actually come to the beta decay, and beta decay, it cannot be only E plus, it can be only E minus, can be E plus also, okay? So it can be a beta plus decay or a beta minus decay, okay? But we are going to look into more examples, and I think it will become more easy. So when we talk about the mass, it is 10 to the power minus 31. And here, if you're considering proton neutron together, it is 4 into 10 to the power minus 27. Even if you forget that 4, that is minus 27, this is minus 31. So this is much lighter. So the chances are that this will actually have lesser interaction, okay, let's say with a piece of paper compared to helium. So if you consider a helium nuclei or an alpha particle, that can be actually stopped by a piece of paper. But then for an electron, it might not be possible. Okay? You might need your hand to stop that electron. But when it comes to gamma rays, you already know that these are radiations. So we do say they are photons. Okay, and photons are basically nothing but carriers of energy, and they are massless. Okay, at least for all practical purposes, we consider them massless. Okay, but when we consider them massless, that means the chances of their interaction even with your hand or body or a piece of paper is going to be minimum. So if I really want to stop this gamma radiation, I do have to use a very intense, a very dense material, okay, and lead, okay, PB, lead is one of the most well-known material which has been used for shielding nuclear radiation, okay. Also, if it can stop gamma radiation, that means beta and alpha radiation is just a piece of cake for something which is a lead shield. So we don't have any nuclear experiments set up in our lab. During my MSc days, I have done some nuclear experiments, okay, and they actually we use those lead shield, okay. So if you take a brick of lead, okay, it's basically in the form of a brick, the normal standard brick size that you know, but that's very heavy, okay. It's not that easy to pick it up, okay. So it's very dense. So that means that is actually quite efficient in stopping the radiation. So some of the most common examples that we know about radioactive decay. I'm sure I don't need to provide any notes for this because I think these are very simple. Okay, you can always make your own sentences here. And these equations might be a bit important because be it your MSc, be it your BSc, or be it your for any entrance exam, the question dealing with Q energy, binding energy, some reaction and right hand side and left hand side, find out the difference of energy are very common. So these equations which are there, you should more or less be very much familiar with these things. Okay, I think this is important. So what happens is something like an alpha particle can be actually extracted, or it actually can be given out by uranium. So uranium, you know, is a very heavy element, and mass number is 235, and 92 is the number of protons. So you see the number of neutron is much more. So if you just remember that graph, I do have that graph later, and if you plot the graph between n and z, okay, so probably this is your okay, I will take this as an n is low, so I'll take this as n, and then this is z. So n and z, if you plot the graph, this is the stability region where n is equal to z, which usually is not observed. If you look into it practically, if you go to higher atomic numbers, you are going to see that the number of neutrons will be more. So the stability region would go something like this. The neutron would be more, but the proton won't increase that much. Okay, so you see this region, the neutron is more, the proton is, let's say, this much. If you go to this region, the neutron has increased sufficiently large, okay, but then the proton has not increased much. So the number of neutron will keep on increasing more and more. So if you go to heavier and heavier atom, because of this reason that Coulombic repulsion must be overcome by the nuclear force, for heavier atoms, more neutrons actually makes it more stable. But then there is a limit to it. In fact, if you have something, the atomic number, the number of protons greater than some value, 58 or something, I think I've written that, it becomes unstable. And as soon as it becomes unstable, it wants to go back to the stable state. So see, these are all laws of nature. Okay, we being a student of science, or follower of science, okay, in general, or if you are a scientist, if you're doing some kind of research, you cannot change the laws of nature. Laws of nature remains there. We just try to understand how it happens. Okay, so it's very difficult to mimic nature, but then that is how it exists. This is actually something which we can consider as stable. Okay, but then when we go to the higher a value, it will basically become more and more unstable. As soon as it becomes unstable, anything being in unstable state wants to come to a stable state. So if you basically have a car which is actually sliding down from top of a hill, it will basically want to come back to the ground. Okay, it will basically want to come back here. So it slide down towards this direction until and unless you offer a brake. So that means it is trying to come back to the stable state. So here also it's the same logic. Okay, it is trying to reduce and go to the minimum energy state. So for some of you, if you have started your project work, you've written your abstract, and if you're working on something like DFT or theoretical work, you will see that if you consider any kind of atomic system, first you want to consider the system in its ground state energy, and then you start your analysis or study or research. So it's very important, everything should be studied from a stable state. So when alpha basically, see, understand what I'm trying to say, okay, because this equation might be very much known to you, but the important part is the logic behind, the nuclear physics behind, okay, so that's important. So we can actually say that there is an alpha decay, so that means the number of value of A will reduce by 4, so 235 will become 231, and then this is 2, so that means this 92 will become 90, it will reduce by 2 because alpha particle is out there. So it is 23190 thorium. So this is again an isotope of thorium. This is an isotope of uranium. Okay, radioactive isotope is a very important term. We are going to look into that later. And then we can also have some examples of beta decay. You know, this is something which is there, 14 carbon. Okay, there are different kinds of radioactive nuclei. One which appears naturally, one which is man-made. Okay, or one which was not present originally on the Earth's crust. So there are three types of radioactive elements. We are going to discuss that also. And what we have is this carbon, and then it basically has a beta decay. So we have this, okay. So we basically have a negative charge coming off out of it. So essentially it has created a hole. So that means the number of protons will increase by 1. So it is 14N7, which is again an isotope of nitrogen. So you have to understand this. If I write down +1, it will become 5. If it is -1, it will become 7. Okay. So this we will see later. We'll see some numerical. I think that will be more clear. And then we have got the gamma decay. So what happens is there is some transition from the excited state to the ground state, which does not result in emission of any particle. We already know about ground state and upper energy state and so on, from atomic physics, from nuclear physics, everywhere. We're going to look into it more detail in this particular chapter. But then if something there is a transition from the upper energy state and the lower energy state, there is some loss of energy, but it is not mandatory that that loss of energy will be in the form of any particle. It will be just energy. So means just energy means just photon. Just photon here in this case it's gamma waves. So that means it might have emitted a single uranium might have emitted an alpha particle to come to the next stable state. Remember, thorium is also not stable. The stablest would be nothing but lead, and uranium ultimately decays to lead, okay, LEAD, sorry, PB, okay, lead. So it basically decays to lead, but then we are just going to one scheme of reaction. This is also not something which happens in reality. Okay, in reality there will be a number of radiations coming out and going into different states, and all those things will happen. It is just an idealized case to understand what happens. Okay, so please don't have this misconception that these reactions actually happens one by one. No, there are a lot of things happening simultaneously. Everything has been studied part by part. Okay, so we're just doing the part by part study. So as soon as there is an alpha radiation, it doesn't mean that this will actually come to a better ground state. Okay, it will actually try to become a bit more stable by emitting some gamma radiation also. So at the same time, when it emits alpha radiation, it might emit a gamma radiation also. In fact, not might, most of the time it does emit radiation. So these are nothing but gamma radiation. So these are nothing but photons. So that's again important. Okay, so please understand the underlying essence of this. So I think we already know. Okay. William Röntgen, because he has received his Nobel Prize in 1901, if I'm not wrong, the first Nobel laureate of physics. And this was actually nothing but because of the discovery of X-rays, right? I think we already have a basic idea about X-rays. And what happened is in the year, this is actually how radioactivity actually got its importance built, okay, over 1900 and 1800. Towards the end of 1800, what happened, he actually saw these invisible rays which were actually emitted when electrons bombarded the surface of certain materials. Okay, so we have certain materials and electrons are being bombarded on them. Okay, and then what happened was that the photographic plate got dark. Okay, that is what actually happened, because he didn't knew the name of these rays. He actually just named them as X-rays. Okay, so these case stories are very common. So we had this actually caused photographic plates to darken. It's something like it has a reaction on that photographic plate. Okay, and then some part is stopped by the obstacle in between. Let's say your hand. Okay, the bones doesn't allow that ray to pass through. So that part of the photographic plate will remain white, and that is how X-rays actually happen. Okay, so this was actually the beginning of understanding radioactivity. Okay, so these are high energy emission, okay, rays, and these are called X-rays. So these are high energy because they do affect your body if you are exposed too much to it. Okay, so that means it is something to do with radioactivity, because when radiation is harmful to your body, so even though their mass might be less, because of which they have got a very high speed. Okay, the thing is they still affect your body, and that's why it is said that probably in a year you should not do an X-ray of your body if you are having any kind of let's say damage in your bones or something like that, where you need X-rays. Should not be done more than once in a year, once or twice. Okay, because that affects. Okay, because what happens is it affects your cell, and that actually might be a cancer causing reason. Okay, that's very important. So then came Henry Becquerel, okay, and then he worked on this process called phosphorescence, 1852 to 1908. And if you remember in your last semester, we studied about different types of fluorescence, okay, phosphorescence, chemiluminescence, and so on, okay. So phosphorescence was something which was studied initially, and then actually it was observed in some kind of minerals. So what happened was it will actually emit some kind of light after being exposed to sunlight. So even if you remove the sunlight, it will still keep on emitting some kind of radiation. Okay, so that is also something which forms the base of radioactivity. Okay, so this was actually nothing but phosphorant uranium salt. Now you might ask that was it uranium? Well, no, the answer is no, because it was not pure uranium as such. Okay, uranium salts. So whenever you have uranium and you want to actually have uranium 235 or uranium 238, you need to process it, you need to refine it, fine tune it, and then only you can get pure uranium. Usually in the ores and all, it doesn't exist in its pure form. It is basically formed in the form of salts and so on. Okay, so I think these things you've studied in your chemistry in your 910. Okay, ore and how to do this refining and all. I think this is a very simple thing. You can still study that in advance, but that's more of a chemistry part. So what happened was, since I'm talking about uranium, let me just talk about this also. When we say abundance, so you say uranium 235, uranium 236, uranium 238. All of them has got a different abundance. Okay, abundance. So it's 98%, 1%, okay, 90%, and so on. So if you take up a book, they will say that the abundance of uranium 238 is more compared to uranium 235. Okay. Now, what do you exactly mean by abundance? What do you mean by 90%, 10%? Does it mean that 90% of the Earth's crust or 90% of the region where uranium is found is uranium 235, and let's say 238, sorry, and uranium 235 is just 10%, something like that? Actually, that's not the case. Uranium 235 and 38 are more or less in a mixed state. So when you extract from the ore, you have both of them possible, present. Okay. So 90% of that would be nothing but uranium 235, and the remaining part will be the other part, and so on. So that is how it works. Okay. That is how the abundance works. Okay. So it's not that you have to move around the entire Earth, find out in which crust region we have uranium, and then measure, calculate, and say it is 90%, 10%. No, it's not that, right? So we already know these things. So Henry Becquerel teacher talked about phosphorescence, and then came the person who actually had this breakthrough in the radioactivity process. And then Marie Curie and her husband Pierre Curie were actually the person who actually took up this Becquerel's work further. Okay, and he took the mineral, they took the mineral, and it was actually, they named it as pitchblende. Of course, it's basically having uranium, so it was very dangerous to work on it. Okay, in fact, they actually had this health ailment issues later in their career because of this, purely because of this research work. Okay, and then what they did was they isolated the components emitting the rays. Okay, so what they did was they isolated the component. So if you have uranium salt, you have different components there. They separated everything. Okay, they basically did some processing, some chemical reaction, okay, and so on, and then they separated out the thing which are actually emitting the rays. So what happened was they saw later that the darkening of the photographic plate was due to the rays emitted specifically from the uranium atom present in the mineral center. So I think this is a very straightforward sentence. The underlying importance here is that you have uranium, and then you've got other salts, and then you take a photographic plate, you see that it gets darkened. Now the thing is, does it happen because of uranium or because of the other salt? Okay, so at that time you did not have those advanced technique or spectroscopy and so on. Okay, so that time the resources were minimum because the research was taking shape. Okay, the research in physics, the research in chemistry and all, it was actually taking more and more pace. Okay, it was gaining pace, but it took some time. So not much facilities were available. So they actually use this indirect ways. What they did was they did the refining and all, processing and all, separated all the components. Okay, you can easily understand. That time it was well established how to identify an element. It was not very difficult. Just do some chemical reaction, change of color and all. Okay, titration and all those things, and you can easily understand that. Okay, there is a chemical which is there, which is present. If it changes to this color, means this is the chemical which is present, and then there were processes to change it. So it is more of chemistry. I think none of us are strong in that. I think, okay, so except some of you, but I am not that strong. So the thing that happened was gradual. Okay, it took time, and that is why this year is given. Okay, this timeline. Okay, this timeline is given. Okay, this is very important. So what happened was this sample was studied, and then it was seen that it was because of uranium. So then we have the radiation types, and then isotope is something which we already know, and we have the same atomic number but different mass number. And if we consider the same atomic number, means that we are considering the number of protons plus neutron might be equal, but then the number of neutrons will be different here. Okay, so the number of neutrons is different. Okay, so whenever I say the mass number is different, that means the number of neutron is different. So if I'm considering something like an isotope of uranium, and you talk about uranium 235, 36, 38, all of them has got different number of neutrons, and this different number of neutron makes it unstable. Okay, makes it unstable. So all of them doesn't behave the same way. Okay, so that is important. So you know what is isotope now? Same atomic number, different mass number, and then when these are actually with unstable nuclei, that means they are going to emit radiation. So they are going to be radioactive. Okay, and that is why they are called radioisotope. Very simple term. Sometimes we miss the underlying importance of this term. Okay, we don't really consider it, but I think that is wrong. Whenever we study a term, is important. Radioisotope. So radio comes from radioactivity because it is unstable, emits alpha, beta, gamma, and isotope because it will actually have different number of neutrons. So mass number is different. Okay. So that is why anything which is radioactive, let's say uranium, will actually consider it as radioisotope. So if we consider something like plutonium, thorium, okay, I have the periodic table where we can actually see which are the elements which are considered to be radioactive. There we actually say that these are all radioisotopes. So radioactive decay, I think this is very simple. Emit radiation to attain more stable atomic configuration. I think we don't need to emphasize on the fact again and again that why it wants to attain the most stable configuration. Everything in nature wants to come down to its ground state. Very important. And that is why whenever you do any kind of theoretical research, doing it from the ground state understanding of the atomic system is very important. So why radioactive? Because they are unstable, okay, and then basically they have excess energy. Unstable means excess energy. Okay? सारा दिन दौड़ा कूदा, okay, you can run away everywhere. A person who is, let's say, 50 plus won't be running around everywhere because he is not having that much energy. Okay, but then that is why it is analogous to your real life. More unstable, someone will get matured will be more stable. Okay, but anyway, this is basically has got excess energy. Okay, unstable nucleus, and then it of course wants to go to the ground state, and then it becomes stable by emitting ionizing radiation. So please remember, if something is unstable, doesn't mean it will straight away start emitting radiation. It depends on how much unstable it is. More unstable, alpha radiation, a bit less than beta radiation, a bit lesser than it will be only gamma radiation. So if it's gamma radiation, maybe you won't be able to realize it. So you need those detectors. Okay, I think we have studied about superficially, but I think you've studied it before about something like GM counter and all. Okay, Gregor-Muller counter and all. So if you go to a tourist destination like, let's say, Chernobyl, okay, it's more or less a tourist destination nowadays. Nothing exists there. Within the vicinity, there is more or less no livelihood. But you can still go, okay, take some precautions. Some of the regions are totally not accessible to people, okay, general public. But you can actually take your GM counter. GM counter is something which can also be made handheld. So handheld devices. You can go and take a GM counter and stand somewhere, and you will see that the GM counter will actually detect the radiation. Okay. Now that will detect radiation. You are not really sure whether this is alpha, beta, or gamma, but most of the time gamma radiations are there, and gamma radiation can be detected. Okay, it's possible nowadays with advancement of technology. So this is actually how radioactivity can be actually detected. Okay? So might be you won't be able to detect it with your body, but then it will be able to detect it with some specific devices. Okay. So this is the slide where I'd like to stop. Okay, because there is a lot of theory. So
beta particle and alpha and gamma. So I think this picture is quite clear, and then I think this should be alpha here. So what happens is we have an alpha particle, and then it can be easily stopped by a piece of paper. Okay, so you have basically have got an A4 page, you can stop that alpha particle. So that means alpha particle, the chances of alpha particle causing harm to you might be minimum. Even if you are shielded by a wall, you can actually be saved from alpha particle. But then comes beta particle, which actually cannot be stopped. Okay, so that it basically has an effect on your body, and but then it is not strong enough to cross the thickness of your body, okay, the thickness of your entire palm of hand. Okay, so that is not possible. So beta particle can be stopped by hand, but then it might cause you damage, so that is important. So I think all of us has seen that sign of danger for radioactive location. That's basically yellow, and I think someone has presented a seminar also on that. Okay, so I think that is already known to you. And then finally, we have got the photon or the gamma rays, and then you might ask that why not lead? Yes, lead is good. Lead is actually one of the best. But then when those nuclear reactors and all are constructed, it's not that everywhere lead is used. Concrete, okay, concrete. In fact, cement is actually also a good option, because cement, you know, it's very dense, and then if it is constructed well, okay, in a proper way, scientifically constructed, and then this cemented wall can also protect you from gamma rays possible. So that's why those domes that you observe usually, if you watch any kind of sci-fi movie or any movie where they are talking more about nuclear reactors and all, if you watch the HBO series on Chernobyl disaster, you will see those kind of structures. Okay, and those structures are not made of lead; they are made up of concrete artifacts. Okay, so I think that is a proper understanding which is important.